Cameras are on. Mic's looking good. Everything's okay. Okay?
Yeah.
Ready?
Yeah, ready. I'm ready. Sit down.
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm gonna put this. Okay. Have I got everything I need? Yeah. You tell me when we're good, yeah?
Just do a little bit of talking.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Right.
We good?
Cameras are good.
Okay. Yeah, ready?
I'm ready, yeah.
Okay. All right, this video is going to be the response to the budget on Friday. So we're filming this on Thursday 29th. So the budget was 6 days ago. First, I'm going to just say straight up, this is going to be a bit of a longer video than the normal videos. And that is because the budget situation is a very serious situation. Normally for YouTube, we sort of shoot for like 10-minute-ish videos because like that's whatever is better on YouTube. And we kind of snip it up to make it like good YouTube length. But that obviously requires some editing and some sort of like careful planning. And for this, basically, I just didn't want to snip anything up or cut anything down because it just didn't feel like the right thing to do, basically. Because it's a very serious situation. There's like a lot to talk about. So ultimately, it's going to be a very long video and you can watch as much or as little as you want. But given the seriousness of the situation, I just felt like we just have to basically talk about everything all the way through. And I've got my computer here so that I can sort of try and get everything in. And the video is going to be split into two parts. First, I'm just going to talk about basically my experience of the budget. And that's like a little bit, not normally what we do. It's more like a very analytical channel. And there will be analytics. And if you want just that, if you want just the analysis, we'll put a little button up so you can skip straight to it. But the budget was just quite a big moment for me. And I want to talk about that just because I think it's important. But basically, it gave me some conflicted emotions about even doing this video. And I think it's important that people realize the importance of the situation. You know, the last few days I was at Labour conference and there was a lot of sort of optimism there because, you know, given this sort of catastrophic collapse in the government, they're sort of thinking we're going to win the next election. And it just sort of left me standing there thinking, I'm not quite sure people understand just how serious this is. So I want to just talk about what it was like for me to watch the budget. Maybe it's more just because I want to get it off my chest, but I think people need to know it from the human side as well as the analysis. So we're going to start with that. And like I say, if you want to skip it, you can skip it and we'll tell you where to skip to. We're filming this on the Thursday. The budget was last Friday. So I live in East London, quite close to Canary Wharf where I used to work. I've got like quite a nice apartment here that I bought when I was working. And right now I'm writing a book, so, you know, I'm not working regular hours. So I woke up quite late on Friday and I went over to the kitchen over there. I think we can see it on this camera, kitchen there. And, you know, I wake up every morning and I cook myself porridge for breakfast every day, which was a promise I made to myself when I quit the city. And that's what I was doing. So I was cooking my porridge on the Friday and I've got a TV just here and I was watching the budget. And I came over with my porridge and I sat here and I watched the budget. And so in the budget, you probably are aware if you're watching this video, there was announced basically like a massive slashing of taxes for the richest people. The big thing which was unexpected was they cut the 45% bracket, which applies only to people who earn above 150 grand. I think it's important to realize, like, you hear 150 grand, you think that's cutting taxes on people who earn 150 grand. It's not. If you earn 150 grand, you are unaffected by that. Even if you earn 200 grand, you're only saving not a huge amount of money. The people who save a huge amount of money from that tax cut, people who earn sort of 1 million, 2 million pounds a year. So it's a huge tax cut on people who earn millions of pounds a year. Obviously, in the context of people who watch this channel will know, in the context of, in the last 3 years, the largest and fastest ever increase in inequality in the history of the country. And, you know, I think outside of wartime, the largest and fastest ever decrease in broad living standards in the history of the country. And, you know, people who watch the channel will know, like, basically the main thing we talk about on the channel is to try and get people to understand that the fall in living standards is connected to and ultimately caused by the increase in inequality, and understanding that when inequality increases, that hurts ordinary standards for ordinary people. But not only that, right? You know, the reason that I'm able to live in this quite nice apartment is because I used to be a trader, and I made a lot of money after the 2008 crisis by basically betting that because we would have very high inequality and because inequality wouldn't be fixed, there would be a massive collapse in living standards and that the economy would never recover. So you know, my history as an adult is basically a history of predicting disasters for ordinary people on the basis of increasing inequality. So when I was sitting here on Friday and I watched the budget, and they're obviously announcing these massive tax cuts for very wealthy people, in the context of this cost of living crisis where ordinary families increasingly are struggling to eat and to heat their homes, obviously straight away, I recognize that that is going to cause a massive falling in living standards. That's going to cause a massive fall in living standards for ordinary people. It was a strange experience, right? Because obviously I'm here, you know, in this quite nice apartment, you know, and you know, there's a mortgage on this apartment, but I could pay it off if I wanted to. And, you know, materially I have a very comfortable life, and I'm sitting watching these tax cuts on wealthy people. And, you know, I don't earn 150 grand a year nowadays. But I'm not going to be one of the people that gets hurt by these tax cuts. And yeah, it was very upsetting basically to watch. And it's just, basically it's just a strange experience, you know, because, you know, I'm here in East London close to Canary Wharf, but like very close to here, there's a lot of families who are not rich. And for them, this will mean that, you know, it's the mum doesn't eat and so that the kids can eat, you know, and it's, that's what's going to happen because of this. And when I went out onto the balcony, and there's a nice sort of balcony here, you can see, I think this camera will catch, you know, there's a nice balcony and we have a nice view of the marina and we can see Canary Wharf. And I was standing out on this balcony. And am I in the right position now? It's just this sort of bizarre, surreal space you're in where I think most people still don't understand the connection between inequality and living conditions. So in this budget, what the government did is something which in a way is quite clever, because they cut taxes a very small amount for ordinary people. So then if you're an ordinary person, you're looking at sort of this, maybe an extra, whatever, 50, 100 quid a month tax cut from the government. And, you know, one of my good friends called me up, his name's Jeremy, and he asked me about the budget. And he said, you know, I think people are going to be happy because they've got this like 100 quid tax cut. And, you know, I understand it because people were sitting there struggling and they're like, we need a 100 quid tax cut, right? But at the same time, they're cutting taxes for very, very wealthy people by tens, even hundreds of thousands of pounds if their incomes are huge. And, you know, I've been trying to make the case on this channel for the last 2 years now. You know, I talk about it a lot, but, you know, if you haven't watched that, I would really recommend you watch the first video on this channel, how COVID-19 is making the rich get richer. You know, that was over 2 years ago now. And since then, I've basically been trying to explain to people that if the government gives a huge amount of money to rich people, it will make your life get worse, primarily because prices will go up. And, you know, during COVID, the government oversaw the biggest ever increase in inequality in the history of the country, but people accepted it because ordinary people had thought they had their finances protected. But the reason they got hurt is because if ordinary families got £1,000, rich families got 100 grand. And, you know, I've been trying to explain to people, if you allow that, your lives will get worse. And then I see the government come out with this budget where they're giving ordinary families, you know, 50 quid off their taxes and rich families 50 grand off their taxes. And the fact that they think they can do that The fact that they think they can do that obviously means I haven't done my job well enough, because they think people will accept it. And if people understood that giving huge amounts of money to rich people makes ordinary people's lives worse because prices go up, they wouldn't accept it. And it's my job to try and make sure people understand that. And enough people don't understand that the government thinks they can get away with things like this. And because of that, there's going to be another massive increase in poverty in this country. So it's very important that people understand this. And I'm going to explain it again, and I'm going to try explaining it in a different way that hopefully makes it clearer so people can understand, okay? Money is not resources. So money is not food, money is not energy, money is not housing, money is not healthcare, okay? If the government gives everyone more money, that doesn't mean there is more food, doesn't mean there is more energy, that doesn't mean there is more housing, that doesn't mean there is more healthcare. Money is the asset that we use to determine who gets the real assets, okay? That's what money is. It doesn't make you, the society, rich to have more money. Money is used to determine who gets the real assets, okay? So if the government gives you £100 and the government gives the rich 100 grand, you will have £100 more cash and you will get less real assets. You will get less food, less energy, less housing, less healthcare, because money is about relative wealth. So when the government gives you £100 to buy you off for giving the rich 100 grand or 50 grand or whatever the tax cut the rich gets, you have to understand what it means, okay? You have to have a focus on the distribution. And when something like COVID happens, where the government gives loads of money out, but the people who end up richer are the rich, you will have more money and less resources. Money is fundamentally a competitive resource. If you get a bit more money and the rich get a lot more money, you will become poorer. You will get less housing, less energy, less food, less healthcare, less everything. That is the way money works. It's a fundamentally competitive resource. I'm going to say it again and again, because if you don't understand this, and if ordinary people and ordinary families, who are the people who get hurt, don't understand this, then you create a situation where the government, which is increasingly run by multimillionaires, can give you 100 quid and can give their class and their rich mates 100 grand each. And if you are happy with that 100 quid while they get 100 grand, then you and your family and your communities will get poorer and poorer and poorer whilst you are getting these 100 quids. So you need to step back from just saying, okay, the government gave me 100 quid, and have a broad understanding of what is happening with the distribution here. And you need to understand that quite simply, this idea that if we give the rich a ton of money, it's going to improve the economy and make your life better, it's quite frankly bullshit. And the reason why I'm able to live in this luxury apartment and I don't have to pay a mortgage on it, and the reason why I haven't had to work a job for 7-8 years, is because I've bet for years and years that that's bullshit. If you allow inequality to blow up, those rich people are not going to use that money to improve the economy. They're going to use that money to buy your mum's houses, and they're going to give that money to their kids, so that when your kids go with their 50, 60 grand deposit to try and buy a house, their kids have got 300 grand deposits and your kids won't get the house. Money is a competitive resource, and if the government is giving absolutely tons of it to the rich, whilst they're giving bits of it to you, you and your family and your community are getting poorer. And that is the key message I basically want you to get from this video, okay? Because the government did that because they think they can get away with it. And the government thinks they can get away with it because they think you don't understand that. And they think they can give you 100 quid off your taxes, and they can give millionaires 100 grand off their taxes, and they think you'll be sitting there happy with your 100 quid. Don't be happy with your 100 quid. Understand that the government is giving the rich a ton of money, and that money will make you poorer because it will make the prices go up faster than your bank balance goes up and faster than your wages go up. Okay, so that's the most important thing I want you to understand. And now we're going to get into what happened after that, because what happened after that was quite crazy and quite interesting, which was, so the government traditionally, historically, when government make spending promises, or this is kind of a spending promise because they're cutting taxation, so they're getting less money in. If they need to balance their budget historically. Okay, so in COVID, the government didn't balance their budget and they just printed and gave out a ton of money. And it led to this dynamic that I spoke about where ordinary families maybe accumulated like $1,000 or $2,000 savings, if they accumulated any, many didn't. And rich families accumulated, honestly, hundreds of thousands of pounds, huge amounts. And that led to, in a sense, predictable consequences, which is ordinary families had more money, but they got less resources because money is the asset we use to distribute resources. You've got a bit more money, they've got a load more money, so they get more resources and you get less. But they didn't balance their budget, but because it was temporary, markets allowed it. And I think we probably need to unpack what that means. So this time round, two things have happened recently with respect to government finances, which is one, they're spending a ton of money to basically pay your energy bills. And two, now they're massively cut taxes for the richest. So both of these things mean that the government, less money in, more money out. So where does the money come from? So this time round, they can't print the money. And that is because money printing is determined by the Bank of England. The Bank of England is independent. The government doesn't fully control the Bank of England. And this time around, the Bank of England is arguably not willing to print money to fund this because the Bank of England is worried that inflation is already high and it doesn't want inflation to go higher. So that means that they try to borrow money instead. And as I speak about a lot in the channel, in the last few years, wealthy people have accumulated a lot of money, so there's a lot of money to be borrowed. So the government essentially goes to wealthy people and says, can we borrow the money? In reality, they go to financial markets and it's traders, people like me, I used to be a trader, who basically determine, are we going to lend your money to the government or the wealthy people's money to the government or not? And the traders look at the government and they're saying, okay, well, we're not in a one-off emergency anymore. We're not in COVID anymore. And yet even now in these normal times, you are, running a massive deficit, spending much more than you get in, basically so that you can give the rich massive tax cuts. And they're looking at that and they're saying, well, how are you ever going to pay that back, basically? And, I would lend my money to the British government at the moment because it doesn't seem like they have a plan, basically, to pay it back. And, the government are saying it's going to cause massive growth. Nobody believes that. I'd be surprised if even the government believes that. If giving money to the rich caused massive growth, then we would be a fucking rich country because we would be growing to the moon because we've given so much money to the rich in the last 3 years. And has it caused a booming economy? It looks to me like it's caused a disastrous economy. And I don't know whether Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng believe it, but I don't think anybody serious believes it. So they're looking at the government and they're saying, okay, well, you want to borrow all this money to give it to the rich. Your economy is not going to grow. So how are you going to pay it back? Historically, in times when governments have borrowed huge amounts of money, like for example, the world wars, First World War, Second World War, the way that they've paid it back is essentially through inflation. So it's a bit complicated, but if we have huge amounts of inflation, then all the prices go up. The debt stays the same size. It becomes easier to pay back because all the prices of everything have gone up, so tax receipts will go up. So I think markets are thinking, well, maybe there's going to be a big inflation to pay it back. The other thing is that so because markets are scared of this inflation, they start to sell the British pound, right? Because if prices are going to go up, then pounds are going to be worth less, right? If all the prices are really high, then pounds are not really valuable in the shops. Okay, so they sell the British pound. Then the Bank of England looks at that and says, well, if the pound is collapsing, all of our imports will cost more, energy will cost more because our money is worth less, so there's going to be more inflation. So in response, the central bank will almost certainly hike interest rates massively because they're worried about inflation, and that's the Bank of England's job is to manage inflation. So then traders said, okay, well, if the central bank is offering very high interest rates, I'm not going to lend to the government unless I get very high interest rates. So very quickly, traders started to demand very high levels of interest from the government. And in fact, interest rates broadly rose in all kinds of products, most importantly, mortgages. And that's because financial markets and the central bank think this government's policy will be inflationary. which I agree, I think it will be. So they're raising interest rates. So lenders, traders demand higher interest rates because they can get higher interest rates. This caused basically a panic in the market. We could get into the details. Pension funds lend a lot of money to the government. Sometimes they even borrow money and lend it to the government to try and make a little bit extra bang for their buck. But suddenly, the value of these government loans is plummeting because they lent to the government at 0% or 1% for the last 15 years. The amount of interest you get from the government has been very low. And now these guys are sitting on these very low interest loans. Interest rates are going through the roof. Nobody wants these very low interest loans anymore. They start to collapse, and then pension funds who borrowed money to buy these assets, whose price is collapsing, suddenly look like they might blow up. And the end result is that the Bank of England had to come in and was basically forced to come in and support the government and buy government bonds, which essentially means lend money to the government. But really, what is the most important upshot of this? The most important upshot of this is, because of this crazy policy, which will massively increase inequality, which will increase inflation and make your life worse, inflation will rise, which means interest rates will rise. And interest rates are expected now by the market to rise very, very quickly. You know, the Bank of England base rate, the markets think it will go to 6% or even higher, which means that mortgages could well go to sort of 7 or 8%. That would be a disaster for the country. There might be some people who say, okay, well, back in the 80s, interest rates were 10% or whatever. You know, back in the 80s, houses cost, I don't know, 40 grand. You know, now houses cost 700 grand. So, you know, you might be able to afford 8% or 10% mortgage on 40 grand. Not many people can afford that on 700, 800 grand, which is, you know, not an uncommon mortgage size in London. And even outside of London, there are plenty of people sitting on 200, 300, 400 grand mortgages. And if interest rates go up, according to what financial markets and traders currently think they will because of this government budget, then when your mortgage, if you have a mortgage, when the fixed term expires, your interest payment could well treble, which means in the case of many families, an extra cost of quite easily, in many cases, up to £1,000 a month for millions of families across the country. You know, that is in a context of rising energy bills, rising food bills, massively increasing inequality, massively increasing wealth of the richest, which means probably significantly higher inflation going forward. I cannot describe how bad this will be. And if I'm being completely honest, when I watched the budget on Friday, I went to lunch. There's a little Italian restaurant down here I go to, and I was getting a lot of people tweeting me saying, what are you going to say about it? And it was the first time that I've ever thought since I started this channel, maybe it's better that I don't make a video. And the reason I thought that, and I'm not saying that's like the right thing to think, but it's the consequence of this will be so bad for the country and for ordinary families and for ordinary living conditions and for, you know, poverty and rates of poverty, that I honestly thought maybe it's just better people don't know. Because, you know, I have been pessimistic about the economy for a long time. That's how I made my money. And I was pessimistic since the beginning of COVID. And we make a lot of pessimistic videos on the channel. They're often not the most positive. And I feel like it's hard. You know, I've been betting on bad things happening for a long, long time. And I've been watching them happen. And I'm a wealthy person and it's not me that gets hit, but it's still sometimes difficult for me personally. You know, I've been an economist for nearly 20 years now, and every day I look at the markets and I speak to economists and I try and understand what's happening and I try and understand what's going to happen and I try and be right. I think it's very important that people try to be right and try to understand. And, you know, my honest analysis is that things are going to be really, really terrible now. And, you know, I've been thinking that for a long time, but never to the extreme situation as we're in now. And, you know, for the last 10 years, it's sort of carrying this, things are going to get worse, things are going to get worse. It's not easy to know that things are going to get worse, even if you're a rich person. You know, I didn't come from a rich background. And it's people who are just like me and like my family who are going to be hurt. And I have to carry that around, and it's fine, I'm used to it. But sometimes I just wonder if it's right to share that information, because it's bad and because it's not something that makes people happy to hear. So I thought about not making this video and just taking a bit of time away. But at the same time, you know, I said it earlier on in this video, this can only happen because people like me have not succeeded in explaining well enough and clearly enough to ordinary people that if the government gives you 100 quid and gives the rich 100 grand, that makes you poorer. And this is only possible because people don't understand that. So I can't simultaneously sit there and say, this is happening because people like me are not doing our job well enough. And not make this video. Yeah, I think it's not difficult to make things better. You know, if we want to make things better, all we have to do is be serious about measuring the distribution and inequality of wealth. Be serious about how can we reduce that. Be serious about how can we change our tax system so that wealth flows from the very rich to ordinary families. How can we make ordinary families richer? So that when policies come in like the economic management of COVID or like this budget, there's a thorough analysis, both from professionals and from ordinary people saying, well, what's this do for inequality? And we start, you know, really aggressively pushing for policies that make the wealth distribution more equal rather than less equal. And I think, you know, in the last few days, I've had a lot of messages from people who I don't normally get messages from, who are worried. And the reason for that is the people who are going to get hit here, of course, ordinary people are going to get hit badly. But a lot of people who have quite big mortgages are going to get hit quite badly. And a lot of people who have quite big mortgages are not from poor backgrounds. A lot of sort of wealthy middle-class people have quite big mortgages. And they're messaging me saying, oh, what can we do about this? And, you know, there's people who work in the media who are messaging me, people who work in politics messaging me. And what this makes me sort of realise is, look, wealthier people have this sense of politics is suddenly moving in a way that's going to hit me. How can we sort of move against it? And I think because of that, you probably see a lot of pushback in the media. You probably even see a pushback from conservative politicians because they and their families and their communities are going to be hit by this problem in mortgages. And firstly, that creates a big opportunity because, you know, up till now, the people who have been hurt have been, you know, largely poorer people. But the group of people who are being hit is widening to including people who are not that poor, which means we have this opportunity to create a kind of a coalition, an alliance between poorer people and people who are not poor but are not super rich and maybe are more powerful. And if we work together, we can force the government to go back on this. And I actually think there's a very good chance the government will be forced to go back on this, because if those mortgage rates rise the way that I think mortgage rates are going to rise, it will be an economic disaster in the country. You know, these families often don't have the money to pay those trebled mortgage rates. So, you know, they have to sell their homes. You know, young people who have been, you know, I've got friends who save up every penny, you know, sleep on their mum's sofas to save up 70, 80 grand to buy a house as a housing deposit. And now suddenly, because of the mortgage rates, they're going to need 3 times the deposit and they'll never get the home. So it will be a disaster. And I think because of the extremity of the situation, there's a good chance the government will be forced to row back. But what it shows is, this also shows to me, is that sort of richer people have this sense of how can we protect ourselves as a group. And as somebody who came from a poorer background and now works in a space with a lot of richer people, I worry that ordinary people who often find life financially difficult are so busy in the day-to-day grind that they don't realise how important it is that they also, as a group, collectively protect their political position. Because unfortunately, the reality is if, you know, people in poorer and more average financial positions don't collectively protect their financial position, you reach this space where governments, you know, I think Liz Truss with £8 million, can bring in these policies that make you massively poorer, and they can try and convince you that it makes you richer. And you need to reject that. You need to push back against that. But you also need to reach out to people in your communities, your families, your friendship groups, educate them about what's happening. And, you know, I say it again and again, please share these videos. And, you know, I'm not just doing this to get famous on YouTube. Like, you know, I used to get paid more than £1 million a year. You know, if I wanted to make money, I would have stayed there. You know, I do this because I don't want this disaster to happen and I don't want it to get worse. And if we don't take action, it will get worse. And the way that we stop this is by ordinary people, you know, people in ordinary financial situations, understanding we are going to get fucked over here unless we start to work together as a group to protect our interests. And I would encourage you to educate yourself, watch the videos, share this channel. You know, if you have, you know, wherever it is that you go to football, you go to church, you go to mosque, you know, you go to play bingo, tell the people around you, look, this is not temporary. This is getting worse and it will keep getting worse unless we take action. We need to understand and we need to push back in whatever way we can. And, you know, you're not completely powerless, you know. If you refuse to vote for anyone who didn't promise you explicitly, we are going to bring wealth inequality down, we are going to start transferring wealth from the rich to ordinary people, then they would have to give you that. They would have to give you that because these guys need your vote. And I know, you know, a vote is just one thing. And there's other things you can do. You can do community organizing. You can do community education. You can amplify my message. But you need to do that. You need to do that. And I know things are hard. And I know, like, when you're struggling sometimes just to pay the mortgage, which is increasingly going to be a problem, it's difficult to sort of try and take that time to do that education and community building. But if you don't do that, this keeps happening. And this is not a temporary thing. This is not like a bounce that you come back from. This will keep getting worse unless we take action. So yeah, I think we're done. I think that's covered everything I wanted to say. I suppose I should just sort of say, I would love to do more. I would love to make more videos and I would love to answer more of the questions that I get, and we will keep doing videos. We'll keep doing more videos. But, you know, I'm aware that at the level of size the channel is now, and it's growing, but at the level of size the channel is now, like, I'm limited in the power what I can achieve. So I'm working also to grow the channel. You know, recently I got a book deal with Penguin, and hopefully that's going to give us a good chance to grow, but it means also that I need to take a lot of time basically writing the book. So, like, you know, I'm not going to be able to do it by myself, you know, and I don't expect you to do it by yourself either. Like, we only make things better as a group. And, you know, I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep doing everything that I can. But, yeah, you need to do something too. And, you know, if you don't have anything else, just share this video, send it to your friends, because the bigger my voice is, you know, I remember back when Rishi Sunak was Chancellor, I used to go at him a lot. And, you know, I think people thought it was a joke, but I did that because I thought if we bring this guy up personally, he's a billionaire, he's super rich, then it would be difficult for him politically as Chancellor to raise tax on ordinary people. And I worked quite hard to do that because I don't want him to raise your taxes and I don't want him to cut taxes on the rich. But then you see, very quickly, he's gone new Chancellor and then it happens. So we need to build our power, and I need to build my power, and I need to build my voice. So, you know, it sounds selfish, but this is not the only thing you can do, but I need you to share this message so that I can be bigger, so that I can try and do what I can to stop this. And it's not just me. There's other people doing it. There's Tax Justice UK. There's Patriot Millionaires. There's loads of people. And if you want, you can go and you can support them and you can donate to them. You know, I'm not taking donations. I don't need donations. But share the message. Help me grow. And you know, educate your friends, educate your family, and insist, you know, demand that wealth inequality comes down. It's not like a cold hard fact. You know, inequality doesn't always get worse; it can get better as well. But if we don't make that happen, then it will be life that gets worse instead. So look, I'm sorry that's not a positive message. We're going to do more shorter videos. I know this is a very long video, but I felt like it deserved that length. So yeah, lastly, just things are going to get harder, and I'm very aware that it's not me that will take that hurt. And I know that in many cases it will be you. And I'm sorry about that, but we're going to try to make this better. So good luck, and share the video and subscribe. Thank you.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm all right.